This video gives an overview of the Novobiocin antibiotic sensitivity test. In many of the antibiotic sensitivity tests, you're using a particular disc that's impregnated with a specific antibiotic. And it's always important that you look at what the relevant zone of clearing should be in order for the organism to be considered sensitive versus resistant. So for the Novobiocin antibiotic sensitivity test, we use T-soy in this example, a T-soy agar plate. However, you can use other different media that are out there, and in some instances you can even combine information, maybe by looking at a hemolysis reaction along with antibiotic resistance at the same time. So don't think you're necessarily always locked into a T-soy plate, although you should have a good reason for using a different plate rather than a T-soy plate when completing any antibiotic sensitivity test. In order for the organism to be considered antibiotic resistant, first we must make sure that a lawn has been inoculated, and that's simply where we've gone over with the cotton swab repetitively over and over and over, often in two directions, so that we can get a nice coating of the organism on the plate. Once the antibiotic disc was deposited with sterile forceps, then incubation occurs, and then we look to see what we call the zone of clearing is, or if the zone of clearing exists. In the zone of clearing, in this particular test, you want to see an inhibition of growth at least 16 millimeters away from the disc. And so looking here on the inches side, let's turn around. Looking here, we only see that this is actually a few millimeters. So that's not enough for this to be considered antibiotic resistant. And also, if we look closely too, there actually are a few colonies that are forming in growth really pretty close up to the disc. In some cases, you'll see solid growth. You won't even see any effect whatsoever by the antibiotic resistant or the antibiotic disc. So this organism would be considered antibiotic resistant because it completely grows up to within 16 millimeters or less of the disc. An organism that is antibiotic sensitive is going to have a much larger zone of clearing. And again, we're looking at our 16 millimeters. So I'm going to put my ruler here. And this one's going to exceed that by quite a bit. So we want to look for a clearing around the disc of at least 16 millimeters in diameter. Here we have well over 20 millimeters, so probably somewhere 23 to 23 and a half. Another kind of good rule of thumb, although you don't want to be pulling out your spare change, is to look for nickel-shaped clearing or larger. However, that's actually a little bit more than 16 millimeters. So if you have at least a nickel shape or larger, then you've got sufficient clearing. You can look at a variety of other antibiotic discs, and the zones of clearing are always different, as I mentioned, so please make sure that you review that to make sure that you're looking at the appropriate zone of clearing to see how many millimeters should be clear of growth. So again, the one on the left is considered antibiotic resistant because there's growth really up to and heavy growth very close to the disc. The one on the right here is considered antibiotic sensitive because the organism has been prevented from growing with at least a 16 millimeter diameter away from the disc. And that is the overview of a Novobiocin antibiotic sensitivity test.